Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for
You get a house, you get a house, you get a house, you get a house. Unspun.
Thanks, Oprah. I'm
right.
down.
You got
Housing's huge, man. Wow.
Some big announcements yesterday.
The budget,
Magical numbers.
yep, the budget drops, and in that budget, and it's interesting because I distinctly recall Prime Minister Trudeau at one point, I think 4 years ago, was like, it's not the federal government's job to do housing. And now he's like, it is absolutely the federal government's job to make
Check
sure
the
there's
polls.
housing.
Check the polls there, Trudeau. Yeah.
Woo! Okay,
I
tell
mean,
us, unspin it for us, George.
well, it's very ambitious. You and I, how many years? 6 years now we've been doing this podcast. Longest running podcast in the history of political
British
podcasts
Columbian
in British
politics.
Columbia. Let's go for that's the spin.
British Columbian politics done
That's
by two people.
That's the spin of Unspun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, ambitious. And I think we were talking before, and we both saw the same tweet. Some guy did some math on it. And it's like it has to be a house built or a home built every, was it 27 every minute or something like that?
One per minute, because it's like 4.9 million homes is the promise, or something like that. And it's like it's 16 times or something more ambitious than the highest home building year on record. We're hearkening back to post-war, right?
Yeah.
The birth of the Vancouver special, the time you've referenced this for 6 years, George. You've talked about the fact that everything changed, because you and I can mention, the little studio apartment or the one-bedroom apartment, the walk-up little whatever that we were able to afford at First and Cypress in Kitsilano. That's now $1 million apartment. I lived there with two roommates, and it cost us, $350 each a month. So are we going to get back to a time where people can afford where we live? I guess that's the goal here, and people want to slam it because it's like ambitious, but what's the alternative? I mean, I'd rather have ambition than still. And that's not a political statement. Like, frozen in fear is like what we've been for this whole podcast, so 6 years.
A person's living. I mean, we talk the supply and demand. I mean, I'm sorry, it's a supply issue, 100%. So we need more homes. If you have a kid who's 20 years old or 21 or 25, like I have kids in their 20s, believe me, there are no homes to move into. There are no places to live. There is nothing affordable. And it's because we stopped building homes for that exact demographic 30 plus years ago, the early 90s. So, almost a generation and a half of nothing being done by the federal or provincial governments. This is just unparalleled. And since since the Second World War, when we did that massive building. So the key of, I think I'm trying to, it's going to be very expensive because we haven't been spending that money. But what's the alternative? Not have homes? We need to build these kinds of things. We need to share this pain across the country as taxpayers, but we also have to incent the private sector. This can't be government-built homes. Don't expect. I hope they're not going to get the government to build these homes. They look at the programs that we did in the 60s and 70s, and even the ones way back in the 50s. It was private guys building these places, or sometimes army, and they were building a ton of housing. My grandmother lived in a Lions Club development that was built in the late 60s.
Yeah.
I think there's like 500 units in Langley, and that's where she lived and retired and died. It's that's what has to be done. And so when you get cynical about the numbers, politics aside of what Trudeau, and it's too little too late, even though it's a lot. We have to have some kind of goal. We know what the missing number is. We just got to get there. So I just came back from the UK. My daughter lives there now. She lives in Essex, which is, okay, Essex haters. It's a nice area of Essex.
There are Essex haters. We learn something every week on UnSpun.
Yeah, it's kind of a rough area outside London.
Okay.
And so we go from where she lives to get to London. It took us half an hour drive to the train and another 40 minutes to train. So you're looking at basically Chilliwack.
Right.
And of course, the places got lots of places to live and places that are affordable and so when you think about housing, don't think about, how are we going to build all these in downtown Vancouver? No, how are we going to build these in Chilliwack and Hope and Langley and Aldergrove
and have transportation to and from
and
that is 24-hour.
exactly,
There is a lot that needs to catch up on here. But let's go back to,
exactly. You read my mind there. You
did
read my,
I?
that's exactly what I was going to
Okay.
say. In order for that to work, though, you got to do the second thing, which you got to be able to get people to move around, and
Yeah.
that's public transportation and mass transit.
So going back to what you were saying about, like, I hope that government's not building these houses. I hope that it's everybody. I hope that it's everybody and all levels and all costs. And we're not going to let you build that expensive high rise because it doesn't have enough of what this group over here wants to. We need, and also it needs to be
Yeah.
like theater sports. Every single thing needs to be yes and. Yes and.
Yeah.
And if you don't love it in your neighborhood, that there's going to be density growing in your neighborhood, then maybe it's time for you to move out of your neighborhood, because your neighborhood needs to grow up, right? Like the idea that everything's a 40-story tower freaks people out. You and I have talked about that. But when you talk about London or Paris or Madrid or Frankfurt,
3
you look
stories.
around, there is a downtown core with huge towers. We got that. And then there is the sprawling density that goes out pretty much as far as the eye can see. And we can see it happening in Richmond. If you look from downtown south, you can see it happening in Richmond. You can see it happening in Ladner. You can definitely see it happening in Surrey. I don't know when the last time you drove through Surrey, but the density is real.
Langley. Yep.
Right? People there, Langley also growing up. Burnaby is sort of an anomaly. They went straight up because they're kind of sandwiched into a
Lots
sort
of
of
train
a,
stations.
right.
Lots of train stations.
Exactly. But my point here is there has to be available housing that fits with the need, that isn't just about the highest end and the lowest end. There's the chunk in the middle, like you said, like your 20 somethings who have the ability, they're upwardly mobile, they're educated, they're working hard, they're doing the thing, and they just simply do not have a place to live. That's insane. So me, mushy middle girl, is like, it's fine that the will is now there to build a house a minute in this country, but the municipal backlogs of bullshit, like, it's just how much I can't remodel my bathroom, George, in a year.
Yes.
And it's insane.
It's insane. A friend of mine we went to a funeral for a high school friend on the weekend, and she were coming back, and she lives over by the P&E. She went to high school with me, and kids are all grown up, moved out. They have a basement suite. They've always had that. They have a backyard laneway home, right? Makes sense.
Yeah.
East Van, perfect location.
Totally.
4 years. 4
Gosh.
years.
And they were doing it.
And they're like, the cost is astronomical. And she trying to look at how can I do this easier. Her husband knows he's a nurse, but he knows how to build things. He could have built an IKEA, like one of those. Anybody, you could build that. Not allowed. You gotta have the plumbing. You gotta have this. Gotta have this. Gotta have. You can't pop up a little house in the backyard, or even put like we're allowed to. The city's building all these container home buildings, but you can't. You're not allowed to put that in your backyard. Nope. You gotta have this. You gotta have that. You gotta have a path that's approved from the house to the laneway. That has to be approved. It has to be made of stones or concrete or something. That has to be done. Otherwise, you don't get your pass. It's what the thickness of the wall. This. There's no need. It's just like she was saying, I wish I just built a garage and then just pretended it was a garage, and then nobody would have known. I said, she said, but they have these guys that have their territory who work for the city, and they patrol the alleys looking for these places. They've been all this time looking for, which I get it, but seriously, 4 years and all this code stuff they have to follow as far as,
guys patrolling the alleys looking for. We have people living in tents. We have people living in doorways. We have people living in RVs.
Yep.
And we have people actually patrolling lanes to make sure that no one's using a garage as a home. That is ridiculous.
Meanwhile, there are storage lockers people are living in Vancouver.
Right.
That are quite nice.
Terrifying. Yeah, terrifying. But that's crazy that you can't take a container that would be used by the city to create a building, or even one of those small homes. Remember when I said this about the celebration of light last year? Are those fancy little pop-up, what are they called? Booths? No, they were like patios. No, there was some fancy word for them, like chalet, right?
Right.
How can we build those and as a temporary structure for a big event like that, but we don't repurpose or reuse that for people who literally don't have shelter.
Yeah,
Like
and why do you have to have the plumbing to the house and all this stuff? You know, can't you just put the basically a bedroom
shelter.
with
Yeah.
two, you know, and then they can use the shower and the bath and everything in the house. Well, if I was 21 years old and I knew there was a shared bathroom and kitchen in that big house, I'm fine. I just need a place to sleep. Like, why
Totally.
do I have to have all this plumbing and electricity, all this fancy stuff, and then this path to the house?
The path is ridiculous. You're right. It's a non-starter. I want to like so many rallies and protests and things and stuff. And there's so much noise in this world, but I'd love for there to be a permit protest,
Yeah.
like to actually sit in
Mm-hmm.
somewhere and just sit down and say, we're not leaving until you streamline this. This is just not okay. When you look around and you see other, and I'm talking specific to Vancouver right now, because
Yeah.
you look in North Van, the densification there is unbelievable. It's beautiful. People are finding there's so much being built there. There's so much being built in Burnaby. There's so much being built in Coquitlam, Port
Mm-hmm.
Coquitlam, Maple Ridge. Like you go outside of the Vancouver charter territory and people are building stuff. And the reason why we're not getting stuff built in this city in a meaningful way are NIMBYs and permitting.
Yep. Basically.
Drives me
Yep.
bonkers.
And it's, oh man, developers are going to make so much money off this, all that argument.
Good,
Seriously, who
good.
cares? Just build some housing.
Tax them.
Somebody just get to work. Exactly. You get taxes from
Tax
every
them.
unit it's built. Anyway,
Yes.
wow. Oh.
Okay. Okay. So that was 10 minutes. Um, let's move on to a lighter topic. Let's talk about decriminalization
Okay, what?
and safe supply. Okay, so the Vancouver Police Department
Lighter.
Deputy Chief Fiona
Yeah.
Wilson, who is also the chair of the BC Chiefs Association. I'm not sure if that's the right title, but she represented in Parliament on the subject specific to the diversion of safe supply that is landing in these drug busts. I've
Mhm.
got an opinion on that, but I want yours first. When you hear about these uh, safe supply meds showing up in drug busts, what does that make you think?
That it's not working, that whole decriminalization is not working, and that we're actually uh empowering more drug dealers to do what they can do. I just think that we're, you know, this we always talk about this, Jody, the four pillars. You can't do just two pillars of a table. It falls over. You need all four of the pillars of the process, which, you know, includes everything: housing and criminality and drugs, and all those things have to happen simultaneously, just like the housing thing. It's like, so you just do this one thing, and then of course pop up goes another issue. So it's just, and if you live
But
downtown, believe me, it's not
before we
nice.
move into the more unintended impacts of decrim, I
Yes.
want to talk a little bit about safe supply because one thing came to me, and I don't know whether this is. Please feel free to challenge me on this. But my first thought when I heard about this safe supply hydromorphone that's got a stamp that shows that it is from the provincial government's whatever pharmacy. Hey, um, showing up in a drug dealer's drug bust makes me think that okay, so the drug dealers are now dealing safe supply. So one fewer fentanyl laced thing. So it's coming into, I don't love that it's going in there,
Yeah.
but at least maybe the person that is an addict who needs it is going to get it and it's not fentanyl laced. So maybe one fewer person might die. Unintended for sure, but not the end of the world because we all know that there's black market for everything. The part that gets me is less about that, but more about what Deputy Chief Fiona Wilson was talking about with regard to like how to enforce the other unintended consequences of decrim. So the safe supply being as part of the drug bust didn't make me
I
as
don't
upset
think
as
that.
I'd anticipated. You know what I
Yeah, and
mean?
I think police are pretty frustrated by the decriminalization in general. It's
Yeah,
disempowering for them. They feel like, well,
right.
our job is to uphold the laws, and the
Mm-hmm.
laws now are so gray on this front regarding drugs and drug dealers and decriminalization of the. I mean, it seems like everybody gets just to gets to walk around free. And even if you do charge people, they get out of jail within
Oh
5 seconds. So
Oh yeah, don't even.
the drug dealers, if you walk downtown East Side, the amount of drug dealers you can see is ridiculous and so obvious. And the police are obviously know they're there and they can't do anything about it. And how
And why
frustrating
is
would that
that?
be?
Because dealing drugs is still illegal,
Yeah.
right? So that's the bust they're talking about. And then they put them in jail and they get out of jail. And we've got a protest happening today for the union of the officers who run the jails, right? Because there's more violence in jails and there are more weapons getting into jails and drones are dropping more fentanyl. Like they're drug dealing in jail, which just boggles my mind. Like, why haven't we figured out that yet? As another
Yeah, that is
prong of
crazy
it.
how technologies, and of course in the hospital stuff, which we talked about last week, where people are allowed to do
Right.
drugs in the hospital and have their drugs and not be seized, and it just seems like everything is weighted towards the drug addicts and drug dealers, and the rest of us are going, hello? What about
Yeah.
the 99% of us that are not these things? We feel like we're being neglected as residents and homeowners and taxpayers and citizens and whatever. And so I think you see this starting to play out in the provincial election. You see the stuff now where they're slamming the Conservatives and the BC United, saying, "Oh, well, you guys don't care about people." The time that I got accused of wanting to be a murderer when I was in council because I didn't want to increase the budget that on a downtown east side initiative, because I thought, hold on, you can't just throw 5% increase without any information here. Oh,
Right.
you're a murderer.
Oh, really?
Yes, that was actually
Wow.
me and Melissa DeGenova were called murderers by a counselor. And we're
By
like,
a
are you?
counselor.
Yeah, I was in council. Basically, that and Melissa said, so are you calling George and I murderers? Is that what's happening here? Because we didn't want to approve of a 5% increase on a thing that we had no information on and had no idea of the outcomes or what the goal was on a budget. You're like, hold on here. This is not what
Wow,
this is
George.
about. Yeah, that was crazy time. Crazy time at
So
city.
with, as you said, we talked about this last week, and if somebody didn't listen, somebody listening right now didn't tune in to last week's podcast where we were discussing the leaked memo from Northern Health from a nurse up there who was talking about how things are just completely out of hand in the hospital with open, rampant drug use, like walking through clouds of meth and being told not to breastfeed her baby because she might have been exposed to something that could really hurt
Crazy.
her baby. And then that jumped off into like, well, that's not happening here. And then it was like, actually, it is. It's happening at St. Paul's Hospital, and the drug dealers are coming in and out. And then they're talking
Mhm.
about how this is like, it's a problem. And I mean, obviously, it's a problem. Like the analogy I heard on, I was listening to Mike Smith's show today. I love listening to Baldry's Beat there at 10 o'clock. And they were having a conversation about decriminalization. And Mike brought up a point that, an 18-year-old can walk into a bar and not order a beer because he's 18, but he could put down a line of cocaine in front of him and do it and not get into any trouble. Like we've lost the plot when the unintended consequences that weren't thought all the way through. Like you said, you need to know what we're doing, and because
Mhm.
people are going to find a way. Fiona Wilson, the VPD deputy chief, literally said in Parliament, if there's somebody smoking crack next to a family at the beach, we can't do anything about it.
But if the
But that
family
same
drink,
person smoking a cigarette or having a beer, that's a $2,000 fine.
yeah, I was gonna say that you can have a glass of wine. Nope, no, that's against the law. You get
Crazy.
fined for that immediately. It's
Do you
insane.
think he, do you
And
think we flip flop on this though? Do you think the NDP government, when I say we as a province, because we're the first to do this, is it time to flip flop?
well, I think it'll be our job to watch the spin on this because the election's coming and the polls are out and the NDP are slipping, and I think it's because of this file. It's
Yeah.
this drug and criminal file that is really starting to hurt them, and the Conservatives and the BC United are using it to their advantage. But of
Right.
course, with a split vote on the right, NDP will certainly have a very good chance of winning again. But the
They're leading
message
by
is
20
clear.
points. That's
Yeah,
pretty significant
but the message is
lead
clear
there.
that to the NDP, I'm sure that if the right unites together, they probably won't win. the NDP. And so they can't assume that that's not going to happen, that they are going to assume that potentially those guys will get their act together. If they don't, great. But if they do, they're in trouble. So they'll start making decisions, I think, over the next several months that are suddenly going to seem different than what they did in the past. And that's when you and I will come in to the rescue to help you understand what's really going on.
Ta-da! We will be here. But let's shift to federal politics. I mean, the upcoming provincial election will be wild, but looking federally, it just feels like there's one debacle after another. And the most recent sort of news headline takes us back to the ArriveCan app. Now I feel like we're just spending so much time on things that won't actually help Canadians in the end. Right?
It's like the Speaker of the House in the US. Like, are we really? You
Yeah.
guys are doing that again? It's like, can we just get some shit done?
Get some shit done.
It's
guys.
And so that ArriveCan guy he brought a doctor's note. I don't know if anybody was
Christian
watching.
Firth. Christian
Yes.
Firth.
I brought a doctor's note. And so I'm having some obviously mental health care issues because I'm sure feeling okay. Well, he kind of like made a lot of money off us during a very, very vulnerable time for us. But he's sitting there. He ended up answering a bunch of questions, and most of the time he was saying he was forced to answer. They said you have to answer these questions because he refused to answer them previously in the parliamentary hearings that they were having. So but
first time in 100 years that somebody was pulled actually in.
Very American,
right?
The whole thing.
Very.
So his answers were all like, "Well, it was an RFP. I answered the RFP. I got the gig. I'm not like a big company. I never claimed to be. I filled out the forms. I did the process. I got the RFP. I got the gig. And believe me, I've done RFP responses. This is a request for proposals. The government has to do this and get multiple bids.
Yeah.
And I have very low success rate on these because they're super complicated and like huge to do. And so there's no way he didn't have to do that, but he did win it accordingly, fair and square. Apparently there was other stuff that we found out about staff and things, but so that's basically his answer. Like I followed the process, you don't like what you got. That's sorry. I made the app. I did it. It was a piece of crap, of course, as we all know, for those of us who used it. We're like, I could have built this in a weekend. But
I couldn't because I have no idea how those things work. But at the same time, I kind of look at this theater, this circus that's playing out just to find somebody to blame. And the blame falls on the government staffers and people. Because if you think that it was actually Justin Trudeau who's like, yeah, I picked that guy. I mean, come on. But if it's just like 8 more years of Justin Trudeau, it's like, okay.
That might happen on a local level, but it's
oh
not.
my gosh, we had that story of MNP, the allegations
right.
around the clean energy. We're gonna have an audit of that too. It's like, okay. Or we just add some common sense to the process. How about the people who write the grants don't get to choose and get paid don't get to choose who gets the grant? Like, I mean, that's not hard.
I know, and
that's not hard.
And that was built in the process. They built that.
Right. It's not a surprise. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't. So everybody that allowed that, fine, you're grandfathered in. You're done now. And now we'll have this independent entity do the choosing and this independent entity and what do they call it? A wall of whatever, not within a company.
No, but
because that was the argument.
Of course, then we go, oh, great, another layer of bureaucracy that you have to go through to get your money.
Hire an independent, group of people. Hire it, make it business, make it economically.
That one for sure, because it was a business incentive program. Like, yeah, it's just there's been so much money thrown around over the last several years since COVID that
for sure
they need to start thinking about how, and of course I benefited from that as an employer. But okay, it's time to think about how we could be, the bureaucracy. You look at the Vancouver data came out that's about employment, how much more people are working at City Hall, how much more the payroll has gone up in 1 year. I looked at I think about 10% in 1 year payroll. Like, that's crazy.
Wow.
So
I didn't benefit from any of the COVID support things. Thankfully I didn't need any of them. But I feel for people who are stuck up to their neck in it, looking at this tax season. Like, holy cow. There are people who cannot pay back what they borrowed and are getting interest hit on top of the and then the unaffordability and then You got the inflation piece. There are some people who are struggling mightily. So hearing stories of people and the money and it's going to make the federal Liberals look even worse
Yeah.
to the average Joe who's not in the weeds like you and I are on all the stuff. That'd be like they spent what on who, how, what, right? But I can't find a place to live because rich people, because rich people.
Because of restraint back in the 90s. That's why, it's ironic that cuts by what was a centrist government in the early 90s federally has led to this situation. The previous liberal governments with John, and we all loved it at the time. Yeah. Now we love spending money. So it's like tides have turned, whatever. But
I like to spend smart money.
Yes.
Right.
Government's
when I'm
job
thinking about when
keep
I'm thinking
us safe and protected and make sure that stuff that falls between the cracks is taken care of in our society.
And I would like to look around and see fewer people struggling to the degree that they can barely move. There are people literally frozen, hunched over in like a drug-induced nightmare. And I can't say that if I had to live on the streets of any city that I wouldn't also want to escape into whatever, and I don't have an addictive personality, and I don't say that with flippancy, but I don't judge the people for what causes them to partake. I blame the people that stand there watching it and think, nah, we shouldn't help. Yeah. Like you said, how much time do we need for these 4 pillars? Like, it's not rocket science to figure out ways to help even a portion of people. Stop trying to solve the entire problem all at once and just start somewhere. Like, let's do it. And that's true with housing. That's true with addictions, like the decrim. And like, I understand the decriminalization of personal use drugs. The idea was that people would stop using alone because people using alone were dying of tainted supply. And then safe supply was brought in to hopefully stop even more people from using with others or using alone and not having a supply that would perhaps kill them this time. Because the stories we're hearing, George, of the number of times a single individual who uses drugs might be, brought back with a naloxone. These stories are unbelievable.
They're crazy.
Like hundreds of times.
But then there's the people who are dying in these basement suites in their apartments or in their trucks or whatever. And, we have this, and so there's multiple things going on here. And it's complicated and government's got to figure it out. But it's as taxpayers, it's going to be expensive. So are we willing to step it up? Are we willing to share this pain, literally, with our fellow Canadians who are here? Meanwhile, we've got the debate happening about immigration that's going to start happening and whether or not we should be allowing more immigrants into Canada. That's going to be a 1.3 million that we've received. And this is, if we can't handle that, should we be allowing it? But in order to be a prosperous country in such a large country, we need immigration because people aren't having babies anymore. And
we need workers. Yeah, we need people to work. So when it comes to the one more thing I want to ask, because we're running out of time here, but the one more thing I wanted to ask you about with the federal budget coming down was, oh shoot, it just like flew right out of my mind because you went down the immigration. Oh, taxing the rich. Do you have a perspective on that? Because there's always an argument that taxing the rich is going to run the wealthy people right out of the country. It's like Jim Pattison is not leaving.
Well, people do leave, but usually they're celebrities. Right. Because most people, if they're rich, you own a business that's doing quite well. They're not it's the number of celebrities that leave. But I think it's more about, to me, a corporate tax is what you have to be careful of. We as a business owner, and you're a business owner, we work really hard, and when they start hitting us with corporate tax, you start asking yourself when you make a profit if well, it's a lot of work, and if they start eating away your profit. What happens is a lot of guys find ways around it, right? And they hide their money or whatever it is.
Why not stop that? People know how that works. Is that not getting you votes? If you shut down offshore banking, if you shut down the ability to hide big wealth, right? Move it around. Because it's really quite something watching.
Yeah, budgets and money never really win you elections, that's for sure. Right. but they do matter, and there are ways to fix that. But you know, a lot of the funders in government elections are corporate and unions, right?
Right.
And so you keep both those groups happy. But as a business and a taxpayer, as a resident, as a, you know, it seems like taxes are going up everywhere. Certainly provincially, business taxes have skyrocketed. Other on the federal level, the taxes for payroll and CPP. You know, our CPP is one of the wealthiest CPPs on earth.
I did not know that.
I'll get the number for next time.
Great.
It's up there. You got a lot of cash in there because they were allowed to divest and put it into outside the market, and so they've made a lot of money with all that cash.
Right.
So it's a matter of question of what's with all that money sitting there. The concern, of course, will be, oh well, let's just take a little of that money and put it into, because it's protected right now. But if they were to watch that, if any government comes in and says, well, we're just going to
borrow this right here,
$1 trillion that they've set aside or whatever it is. So it's because that's, you know, I'm 60 this year. Like I got my letter. I'm going, hey, you get to get your pension. I'm like, no,
look at you, semi-retired George.
Yeah, I'll show you the letter. You can't retire on that.
All right, George, we find you on your social media. You are at
George_Affleck
at George_Affleck. I am at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on your Twitter, and really everywhere. Everywhere you want to find social media, you'll find us. And we don't have people running our socials. It's just me and George doing our thing. And you join us, unspunpodcast.com. If somebody has shared this and you're like, what is this? Because we're at like 252 episodes or something.
Yeah. Thousands of listeners and viewers every week. Thank you very much. Yeah.
A big tip of the hat to those who want to hang out with George and I. I always feel better after you and I talk. And I love that people learn a little from us when we talk things through, because I don't know the answer to everything, but you've taught me a lot over the years, and 6 years and counting, George.
I know, right? 6 years, crazy.
I love it. Okay, peace out.
Bye.